Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling Søren Kierkegaard, specifically his 1844 work, The Concept of Anxiety.
Which he published under a pseudonym, Vigilius Hofniensis.
Right, the Watchman of Copenhagen. Our sources note the subtitle calls it a simple psychologically orienting deliberation on hereditary sin.
Simple might be underselling it just a tad.
You'd think, yeah. So our mission today is really to unpack what Kierkegaard means by anxiety or angst.
And how it connects to freedom, sin, the self. Basically, core human stuff.
Exactly. Why does this nearly 200-year-old book still feel so relevant to our, 21st century anxieties?
Well, I think listeners will find it's a powerful lens. It helps distinguish anxiety from fear, which is key.
And reveals its maybe surprising role in shaping who we are. A bit of a shortcut to some deep ideas.
Definitely. So let's start with that core distinction you mentioned. Angst versus Frigd.
And anxiety versus fear, what's the fundamental difference for Kierkegaard?
It really comes down to the object. Fear, Frigd, always has a definite object, something specific outside you.
Like the charging bull example or a storm. You know what you're afraid of.
Precisely. Anxiety, angst, though, that's objectless. It's directed towards, well, nothing definite.
An intimated nothing, one source called it. That sounds unsettling.
It is. It's that internal sense of unease, not tied to a specific external threat, like a free-floating dread.
Yeah, I think we've all felt that, which is why Lowry translated it as dread, trying to capture that specific feeling.
Exactly. And for Kierkegaard, this very objectlessness points to something uniquely human.
Our capacity for spirit, meaning self-consciousness, reflection, freedom.
That's the idea. Animals feel fear, they react to danger. But this existential angst, Kierkegaard argues, that's tied to spirit.
Because we can reflect on possibilities, on nothingness itself.
Right. The lack of a concrete object signals this deeper dimension, which leads us to freedom.
The dizziness of freedom. The cliff analogy comes up here, doesn't it?
It does. It's a brilliant metaphor. Standing on a cliff, the dizziness isn't just the height, it's the awareness of your freedom to jump.
Whoa, so it's the awareness of the possibility itself, even if you won't do it.
Exactly. That awareness of potential action creates the unease.
So anxiety is, what is the definition? Freedom's actuality as the possibility of possibility.
Right. It's not just knowing your options, it's knowing you have the power to create possibilities. Life as this open potential.
Indeterminate potentiality. Anxiety is how we experience that openness subjectively.
And it's ambivalent, isn't it? He calls it a sympathetic antipathy.
Attraction and repulsion at the same time. One fears, but what one fears is what one desires.
Yeah, that strange pull toward the very things that frighten us. That tension is key.
It highlights the terrible responsibility of self-creation, as the sources put it.
We're free from pure necessity, but burdened with freedom for choosing who we become.
Okay, so freedom and anxiety were deeply intertwined. How does this connect to sin then? Especially that subtitle about hereditary sin.
This is where Kierkegaard gets really interesting and maybe a bit controversial. He rereads Genesis through this lens of anxiety.
Adam's innocence. He sees that as ignorance, not knowing good and evil.
Pretty much. Not consciously good, just unaware. Then God gives the prohibition, don't eat the fruit.
And that prohibition introduces the possibility of choice. It awakens the anxiety.
Exactly. The command doesn't cause sin, but it makes Adam aware of his freedom to sin. The possibility enters his mind.
Like the pink elephant thing. Tell someone not to think about it.
Right. So Adam feels that dizziness of freedom. He's faced with this new possibility, disobeying.
And that sympathetic antipathy kicks in. Drawn to the forbidden fruit, but also fearing it?
Precisely. But crucially, Kierkegaard stresses that this anxiety is the precursor to sin. It's not sin itself, it's the condition for the fall.
The actual sin requires something more.
Yes, the qualitative leap. Spring it. It's the individual's free choice, the act of actualizing that possibility. Anxiety makes it possible. The leap makes it actual.
Okay, so this really challenges the traditional idea of hereditary sin, where we're all born guilty because of Adam?
Absolutely. Kierkegaard, well, Hofniensis, objects. It makes Adam fundamentally different. It seems ethically unjust.
And most importantly for him, it undermines individual freedom and responsibility, right? If it's just inherited.
Exactly. So his alternative is to distinguish between sinfulness, maybe a predisposition we inherit or that grows historically, and the first sin.
Our own first sin.
Yes. Each person's first sin is their own leap, their own confrontation with anxiety and freedom, mirroring Adam's situation.
Wow. So Adam becomes a prototype. not the source of inherited guilt. The fall gets reenacted in every individual life.
It democratizes the fall, as one source puts it, makes it deeply personal.
Which then leads to anxiety's role in how we actually become selves.
Right. It's not just about sin. It's fundamental to our development as individuals.
How so? How does anxiety shape us?
Well, Kierkegaard sees it as the force that jolts us out of what he calls unself-conscious immediacy.
Like a naive, unreflective state, just existing without thinking about existing?
Kind of. Anxiety shatters that dreaming spirit. It forces us to become aware of ourselves as distinct as having potential, facing possibilities.
It makes us self-aware, aware of ourselves as selves.
Exactly. It informs us of our choices, our self-awareness, our responsibility. Facing that dizziness makes you aware of you as the chooser.
Standing on the cliff edge makes you aware of you standing there.
Precisely. And Kierkegaard actually thinks learning to navigate anxiety properly is crucial. It's an education by possibility.
So dealing with anxiety is how we grow. It's not just something bad to get rid of.
Not in his view. It's central to developing subjectivity, that sense of being a unique individual. He even distinguishes objective anxiety about external things from subjective anxiety.
The kind rooted in freedom and responsibility.
Yeah. And he sees that subjective anxiety as more fundamental, even a sign of maturity.
So it's uncomfortable, sure, but it serves this paradoxical purpose, forging the self by making us confront possibility and choose.
It's the crucible of selfhood. A challenging idea, but a powerful one.
And these ideas didn't just stay in the 19th century. They had a huge ripple effect, didn't they? Existentialism, phenomenology.
Oh, absolutely. He's often called the father of existentialism for a reason. That focus on the individual, freedom, anxiety, authenticity, it all starts there.
We see it clearly in thinkers like Heidegger and Sartre. How did they pick up on angst?
Well, Heidegger, in Being and Time, transforms angst into a fundamental ontological mood, a basic way of being, or Dasein.
Not just a feeling, but how we relate to existence itself.
Right. For him, anxiety reveals our being towards death, our thrownness, our potential for authenticity. It exposes the nothingness underneath and our freedom, creates a feeling of unhomeliness.
So he takes it from Kierkegaard's psychological theological frame into pure ontology.
Largely, yes. Then you have Sartre, using angoisse and doing in nothingness. For him, in a godless world, it's the direct experience of our radical freedom and total responsibility.
Existence precedes essence. We're just thrown here and have to make ourselves with no blueprint.
Exactly. Condemned to be free. And he uses the cliff analogy, too. But the anxiety comes from the lack of external justification for our choices.
So same core link, anxiety and freedom, but different ultimate source. God for Kierkegaard, absence of God for Sartre.
A crucial difference.
And the connection to phenomenology.
It's more methodological, perhaps.
Yeah.
Kierkegaard's focus on describing lived experience, these fundamental moods, self-consciousness, his critique of abstract systems. It really anticipates the phenomenological approach.
That focus on subjective experience, trying to describe it carefully.
Exactly. You see resonances with Merleau-Ponty on embodiment, Levinas on ethical responsibility, felt with anxiety. He was doing a kind of proto-phenomenology.
Fascinating how these ideas branch out. Now, let's pivot to psychology directly. His impact seems huge there, too, even predating the formal discipline.
Definitely. The concept of anxiety, along with the sickness unto death, are really foundational texts for existential psychology and psychotherapy.
And that perspective sees anxiety differently, doesn't it? Not purely as pathology.
Right. It sees anxiety as potentially meaningful, an intrinsic part of being human, linked to freedom, choice, responsibility, finitude, isolation, all those big existential themes.
So the goal isn't just to eliminate it.
Not necessarily. It's more about helping people confront it, understand its roots in these existential givens, and find courage and authenticity despite it, or even through it.
And Rollo May was key in bringing this to the U.S., his book, The Meaning of Anxiety.
Hugely important. May directly drew on Kierkegaard. He defined anxiety as apprehension about threats to our core values, linked it strongly to freedom.
And he made that distinction between normal and neurotic anxiety.
Yes. Normal anxiety is the appropriate response to life's uncertainties. Neurotic anxiety is disproportionate, repressed. May argued that facing normal anxiety is essential for growth.
He even linked anxiety and creativity, that tension being productive.
He did. He definitely preferred Kierkegaard's existential view over Freud's model. It was a real shift, seeing some anxiety as a signal about our existence, about freedom.
A more nuanced, maybe even empowering view. But like any major work, the concept of anxiety hasn't escaped criticism, has it?
Not at all. And the first hurdle, for many, is just.
Mm.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Dense prose, abstract arguments, some found it obscure, even called it a spoof.
Okay, beyond just being hard to read, what are the main philosophical or theological critiques?
Well, theologians debate if his individualistic leap adequately explains the universality of sin. Does it make sin seem too arbitrary?
Right. And von Balthasar felt it was too psychological on its own, needing the sickness unto death for the full theological picture.
Mm. And there's the perennial question. How does this radical freedom square with dependence on God?
And psychologically. Any pushback there?
Sure, some worry it romanticizes anxiety, which can be crippling. The sharp angst-streak distinction is questioned by modern psychology's more complex view of emotions.
Plus, does it adequately account for biology, genetics, environment, things we understand for now?
Exactly. And Hofniensis dismissing anxiety as a disorder might seem unhelpful today, given what we know about anxiety disorders as real clinical issues.
It's clear the book sparks debate. How about different interpretations?
They really vary. People emphasize different aspects, psychological, theological, philosophical. The pseudonym and irony invite questions. Is this Kierkegaard's final word, or is he provoking us?
Like Roger Poole suggesting it's about subverting meaning itself.
Exactly, and people read it alongside his other works, especially Sickness Unto Death, to see how anxiety relates to despair. And of course, there are secular versus religious readings. Can you take the insights without the Christianity?
It resists easy answers, clearly.
That's part of its enduring fascination, I think.
Which brings us to its relevance today. Despite the challenges, why does it still resonate so strongly?
I think because it speaks so directly to the modern condition. We have unprecedented freedom, endless choices, but also deep uncertainty, the burden of self-definition. That dizziness of freedom is everywhere.
Especially with weaker traditional structures to guide us.
Precisely. And his critique of the crowd, conformity pressure, that hits home in the social media age. His call for authenticity feels urgent.
Modern life just amplifies the possibility of possibility, doesn't it? Technology, globalization, so much choice, it can be paralyzing.
It really can. And Kierkegaard constantly reminds us of the ethical weight of that freedom, the responsibility that comes with choice for ourselves and others. That's incredibly relevant.
And for mental health, framing some anxiety as potentially meaningful.
Yes, that connection to existential therapy, post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
It offers a way to engage with anxiety beyond just seeing it as a bug to be fixed, while still acknowledging, of course, the reality of clinical anxiety disorders.
And spiritually, too, maybe. Anxiety is a catalyst for seeking meaning.
Whether theistic or not, yeah. That journey through anxiety towards authenticity, purpose, that resonates. Ultimately, its relevance comes from that inescapable link he identified. Human freedom and anxiety are structurally intertwined in self-conscious existence.
Understanding that is still crucial for self-knowledge.
Absolutely.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive into the concept of anxiety. We've seen Kierkegaard distinguish anxiety, angst, from fear.
We've explored anxiety as that dizziness of freedom connected to possibility, even the possibility of sin via the leap.
And its vital role in forging the self, waking us up to our own individuality and responsibility.
Plus, its huge influence on existentialism, phenomenology, and existential psychology, really shaping how we think about being human.
And we acknowledged it's a complex, challenging text, still sparking debate and diverse interpretations.
Which only speaks to its richness, really.
So a final thought for our listeners. Reflect on those moments where you felt that dizziness of freedom. How might Kierkegaard's ideas illuminate those experiences? What responsibility comes with realizing your own possibilities? Perhaps that's a starting point for exploring existential thought further.